Hi there, and thanks for listening. My name is Daniel Kringer, and this is the SkanFest podcast, an interview series for the Skaneateles Festival, a summer concert series based in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. In these talks, we are getting to know our visiting artists who travel the world making music at the top of their field. The Westerlies, an arty quartet mixing ideas from jazz, new classical, and Appalachian folk from the New York Times, are a New York-based brass quartet comprised of Riley Mulherkar, Chloe Rowlands, Andy Clausen, and Addison Maye-Saxon on trombone. From Carnegie Hall to Coachella, the Westerlies navigate a wide array of venues and projects with the precision of a string quartet, the audacity of a rock band, and the charm of a family sing-along. I am happy to have Riley and Andy here to talk today. So, I'm wondering if we can start off with some background. Since you guys are here, can you each tell me a bit about where you've come from and how music became such a big part of your life?
Yes, and where I come from, it happens to be the same place that Andy came from, and the roots of the band go back there as well. So we both grew up, born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and the name comes from the winds that blow from west to east, and we moved from west to east to study music in college.
Sure.
And so all four original members of the band, the two of us here, and then two others who have since gone on to other things, we all grew up in this incredible music ecosystem in Seattle. A mix of the scene there, with all of its roots in terms of indie rock and grunge and a deep jazz history as well, and a thriving classical scene, and then also a extraordinary music education scene. So in the public schools, we all went to public school and had access to, some of the greatest music educators of our time who happened to be teaching out there. So we were immersed in music from early on, and each fell in love with it in our own way. And the band came together when we had all moved to New York and we were feeling homesick and hanging out together, listening to music, and decided to start playing music, which was a little odd, not because we were all friends and we loved to play music together, but the instrumentation was 2 trumpets and 2 trombones, which I think I can say you almost never see. We don't know any other brass ensemble of this instrumentation, but we loved making music with each other, so we decided to find a way to create a sound, and that was 11, 12, almost 13 years ago.
Nice.
We've been going for a while.
Cool. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Riley said, we feel so fortunate to have grown up in the educational environment that we did. A lot of our life now is on the road, touring around the country and the world, and a lot of that involves getting into schools. And only when we left Seattle and have gotten out around the country have we come to realize how special of an environment that was. Sure. And how lucky we are to have the musical education that we had growing up there. And I actually have a very special connection to this festival because my very first trombone teacher is someone by the name of Duncan Robinson. And anyone here in Skaneateles would probably recognize the Robinson name as the founders of this festival. Yep. So my first trombone teacher was their grandson.
No way.
Who was a family friend of ours, who was about 10 years older than me and was in the high school down the street from where I grew up playing in jazz band. And my first few years of trombone were under his tutelage. Cool. I always heard his family talk about Skaneateles and this festival, and so to be here now feels very full circle.
Yeah, there's another west-east connection too. Huh? Cool. So for you guys specifically, are there any musicians or even just like figures in general that inspire you with your music making or also working as a group?
I mean, the most immediate mentors for us were folks we were lucky enough to be around growing up in Seattle.
Sure.
And they, music and jazz in particular is such a lineage in which one generation gives to the next, and that generation gives to the next. Yeah. And so there were a few folks when we were coming up in Seattle who we consider mentors to this day. One very important person is a man by the name of Wayne Horvitz.
Okay.
And he is a wonderful composer, pianist, club owner, impresario of many different musical projects. And he was someone who was active in New York City in the 70s and 80s in the downtown scene, and then moved to Seattle to raise a family in the late 80s. And he is truly a world-class artist, has toured the world many times over, but happened to live down the street from Riley and taught piano lessons, taught improvisation, taught composition to all of us in the Westerlies.
Wow.
And I would credit him more than anyone with this band existing. He gave us our first gig at his club that he owns. He encouraged us to record our first album, which ended up being of his compositions. And more than anything, he heard something in the sound and the music we were making that he believed in, even more when we didn't quite believe it yet. And said, keep going. There's something here that you all need to pursue.
Cool.
So Wayne Horvitz is a big influence on all of us. A peer of his is Bill Frisell, the great jazz guitarist, and they collaborated a bunch over the years. And both of them have sort of a very wide open perspective of American music, where classical music and folk music and jazz and country and gospel all converse with each other. And I think our musical outlook is very much influenced by their perspective of it's all equal and it all belongs on the concert stage next to each other.
Yeah.
Not to mention also Robin Holcomb, Wayne's wife, is one of the great American singer-songwriters of our time. She was on None Such Records in the 90s. We've recorded some of her music. She's written a great deal of music. So yeah, just that type of community and also that type of perspective on what American music can be was really deep.
Fantastic. Well, we'll kind of dig more into that as we'll get back to some questions about the group and, you know, your, I guess, philosophy when it comes to programming and all that sort of stuff. But a couple other more incidental questions before we get there. Number one, what do you guys spend time listening to if you're not practicing or preparing for stuff?
Well, it depends. If we're in the tour van, there can be lots of, you know, dispute over what should be on based on what the driver needs, based on what the back row is in the mood for.
Sure.
How much sleep someone's gotten, how long of a drive.
Yeah, what the volume is. You know, in the early days, Andy was famous for just trying to put on Schoenberg while we would be driving on the freeway and you couldn't hear a thing. But if we were to just go sort of quick fire, I mean, for me, a lot of my sort of North Stars or guiding lights musically, you're going to have someone like Arthur Russell in there. You're going to have someone like Louis Armstrong in there. You're going to have someone like Sam Amidon, some, you know, people making music today like Sam Amidon, Nico Muhly, Jason Moran, Wynton Marsalis, who's coming here this weekend, is a big mentor of mine. So that's sort of my internal soundtrack.
Yeah. A lot of the same influences. Just on the drive over here, I had Jason Moran blasting on the speakers. Another, I would say, North Star for us is a trumpet player by the name of Ron Miles.
Okay.
And he's someone who collaborated with Bill Frisell, collaborated with Wayne Horvitz, collaborated with Jason Moran, and was from a long time sort of more known as a sideman, but in the last decade of his life really rose to prominence as a band leader and composer. And I would say among those influences, his sound really impacted the way we think about playing brass specifically more than anyone. So he's someone we return to over and over again and want to celebrate, perform his music.
Yeah.
The great Ron Miles.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. Kind of a big question, but we'll see what you guys have to say about it. What does music making mean to you? What gets you collaborating with other musicians and creating new things? What pulls you into it or pulled you into it? Any thoughts?
See, this is great because we spend so much time together, but I have no idea what Andy would say.
I have no idea what Raj would say.
I'm gonna give you an answer.
Yeah, go for it.
About 10 years ago, we were doing a project in collaboration with a number of other people. I would say artists, but they were sort of all disciplines beyond the arts as well. And the folks from Radiolab, Robert Krulwich and Jad, speaking of, podcasts, they were there, and I was hanging backstage with Robert, and we were talking about what he does and what we do. And he framed it in a beautiful way. I think he said, we're all doing the same thing. We're just trying to chip away at the marble to find some truth.
Oh, cool.
And that's what I think of in the act of music making. And through that endeavor, I think you find a way to relate to people, both people you're creating with and people you're sharing with. You're also digging deeper into yourself, because if you're just scratching the surface, literally or figuratively, it's not going to be that deep. So you gotta push yourself. So that's what I find in it.
Oh, yeah, great. Any thoughts, Andy?
That's beautifully said, Riley.
Agree. Yeah.
For me, it's always been largely about community and sort of connecting with other people by playing music, whether that's fellow musicians or audience members. And I think more and more, as we are living in a very digital and sort of screen-based world, to make music that involves air and vibrations in a room with other humans means something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need it, and we need more of it. And so that's the spirit I'm trying to find every time I play music, every time I get to perform music. And it is such an immense privilege to get to do it. For me, it's about that moment in the room with people.
Yeah, great. All right, cool. So you refer to yourselves on your website and in your bio as an accidental quartet. Where's that come from? What does that mean?
That really has to do with how we formed as a group. Riley mentioned the original 4 members were all from Seattle. Yeah. We all moved to New York. We were in college studying music very intensely in these conservatory environments. And we started hanging out outside of school, listening to music, cooking dinner, hanging out. And we always joke that had we played guitar, bass, drums, and sang, we would be a rock band. Because it was really about the individuals more than the fact that Riley happened to play trumpet, I happened to play trombone. And the fact that it was 2 trumpets and 2 trombones was really coincidental. Yeah. And I think we've tried to carry that spirit in the music making sense of it's really about the individuals and their musical perspectives. And it's sort of a coincidence that we happen to be a brass chamber group.
But I gotcha.
As Riley mentioned, there's really not another working quartet. So it's an unusual instrumentation, which we find a great blessing and a challenge sometimes, because no repertoire exists for this instrumentation.
So you're just arranging and composing. Then we'll get to more of that. Did you want to add anything? Or?
No. I was saying, exactly.
So tying into kind of like membership, like what you were talking about, how do you guys find continuity, or do you find things sort of change when the membership changes over time?
Yeah, I think, I imagine any group or any band goes through a similar journey when, naturally you form a band in college and everyone's having a great time and dedicated to that thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what they want to be doing in their 30s or beyond. So when we've had those moments, luckily, I think the thing that got us through was that we had a sort of foundation that had been built in the work that we had done across the board in terms of musically finding the sound, in terms of that process of composing and arranging ourselves and relating to our repertoire that way, in terms of the community that we had built. And so I think those principles were able to steer us through even as personnel change. And so when Chloe comes in, or when Addison comes in, they have an understanding of where this group is coming from, and the history that we've all been through together. And I think if you had someone leave and had a personnel change a year in or 2 years in, it would have been really difficult, because we hadn't really found, we hadn't found our sound. But also we just hadn't, built that foundation. But luckily we really had those formative years together when we weren't making any money and no one would book us any gig, but we were getting in Andy's mom's minivan and just going down the West Coast and playing in art galleries and cafes, and, putting in that time. And that, those years of work really established what the thing was, and it allowed it to succeed, I think.
Cool. Would you say you've experienced any like crucial kind of key moments in your development as a group? Any moments of difficulty or thing like that?
Santa Barbara. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean,
all right, let's hear it.
As I'm sure any artist experiences, it is not a linear path. And so there are moments of what feel like great success, which can be very quickly followed by moments of deep, humbling failure. And I think that's good. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you hungry. It keeps you humble. And the moment Riley speaks of was, I believe, 2016.
Yeah.
We were embarking on a big album release tour. This was our second major album release. We had done a big publicity campaign, and the day of that particular show, we were in Santa Barbara, California. And that morning, one of our songs got a big write-up on NPR, got on a playlist, and ended up sort of going viral as a result of that one placement. This was sort of early Spotify days, and that song ended up on a US viral list of all genres.
Wow, yeah.
Never would have expected that for brass music. And we thought, oh my gosh, we've made it. Later that night, we go to perform at this huge club in Santa Barbara, and I think at the start of the show, there were maybe five people in the audience.
And there are 4 of us, keep in mind. So that ratio between people on stage versus people off stage is key, And 3 of those people appeared to be there by accident, just for dinner. Because they served food as well. So they were talking and eating.
And
then they left mid-show.
By the end of the show, there were 2 people in the audience, both of which were related to people on stage.
Going back to that ratio, you got 50% of what's on stage, off stage. That's, you want to be batting above that percent.
And the feeling of crushing shame when we walked off that stage was...
Yeah, you could sort of focus on the music, and then it was really when we played the last note and you hear just one person clapping. And Willem's aunt was filming because it was just such a beautiful moment. So we had one clap. We did a whole show, but God bless Uncle Scott. But so that was a healthy moment for us.
Yeah,
and there have been many moments like that. I mean, I remember a show in Cleveland where I think there were 3 people came, but then we were on the road at the time. We weren't touring with our friends in Big Thief, but they happened to be in Cleveland at the same time, and they all came and listened as well. So that was like going back to what Andy was saying about community. It was like no one came to the gig, but our friends who happened to be on the road came and listened, and that was a beautiful bonding experience. So yeah, it's all sorts of up, and it still continues.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear, stories, I guess, from early career, groups that are doing well now, for example, that had difficulty in the past but kind of stuck with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the moment when you play a show and no one shows up, it can feel defeating. But I always feel like the most painful and strangest concert experiences make the best stories. I mean, we haven't even gotten into the jet ski dealership or the farm fiesta,
Yeah.
One thing we really abided by for many, many years is we basically said yes to every performance opportunity.
Yeah.
And especially as a chamber group, we would play in spaces or series or clubs that
dealerships.
Or dealerships where you wouldn't expect to see this type of music.
Yeah.
And sometimes that led to really successful situations and sometimes successful failures, which make great stories.
Sure, yeah.
That should be the title of your book, Successful Failures.
It's good. That's a good title. Okay, cool. Let's talk about some of your collaborations then, because you've done quite a lot. Very wide variety of groups. Bands like Fleet Foxes, Grammy nominees, Theo Bleckman. There's a lot more. Can you just share some thoughts on collaborating? What do you like about the process? Specific experiences?
Yeah, I think, from the very beginning, collaboration was always a big part of the band because we wanted to make music with friends in our community, and also because we found pretty early on that the sound of our quartet with voice was something that we found really captivating, supporting a vocalist tell a story and sing in any way. So I don't remember a time when the band existed when we weren't writing arrangements for singers and putting on shows with singers. And then as we got older, our community expanded and opportunities come up where, you get a call from Robin from Fleet Foxes because we had a number of friends in common and have shared Seattle roots, or someone like Theo Bleckman, who musically we admired for a long time and knew so many people in common. Eventually started working together and became so close with him that he was the officiant at my wedding. So all these things, it all just it becomes a larger community where we're always working on things. At present moment, a couple of the things we're really excited about on the collaborative side are our upcoming record with the singer-songwriter Haley Hendricks, and we've been working a bunch with Aoife O'Donovan, great folk singer and songwriter, and
a ballet,
which is a new venture. We're working with choreographers and dancers.
I think to add on to that, because our musical tastes are so varied, this helps satisfy a desire to create music in all different genres that don't necessarily have space in just a instrumental format. And I would say every time we do a collaboration, we learn something in the process that then impacts our quartet music in some way. We might discover a new sound or a new way of arranging or some, compositional idea. And it really feels circular in a way. Like we'll find stuff in our quartet music that then influences the arrangements we write for songwriters. Songwriters will come up with melodic ideas that influence our quartet music. And for me, again, it goes back to this community building and all of us influencing each other's work directly or indirectly.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into the composing, arranging sort of stuff. So I'm, again, looking at the bios on the website. Everybody in the group wears like multiple hats, right? You're performers, you're composers, arrangers, educators. You even have an in-house record label. Can you talk about how all that fits into your work? Maybe expand on anything specific you'd like to mention?
I think it started off for us as just a necessity of being a musician in the 21st century. The the field and the landscape of the business, for lack of a better term, requires that you wear many hats as a musician. And I think for some and for us at times that can feel frustrating, but I think for a lot of our life and working career, we've also felt that that's a huge advantage because it means we have complete control and agency over every decision we make, from the artistic to the business to the record label side to what repertoire do we want to play, how do we want it to sound. And we've always just had this mentality that we'll figure out how to make it exactly how we want to make it. And that translates to composing our own music, because this repertoire does not have an existing, or this instrumentation does not have an existing repertoire. Or if there's a body of music we fall in love with, like some of the music we're going to be performing tonight, Golden Gate Quartet, Judy Sill, John Prine, we can arrange that for ourselves. And there's no better way to find your own sound than to do it yourself. And so we've always found that to be the most successful thing, is to try to take matters into our own hands, both artistically and from an organizational perspective.
Great. Cool. Great. So like you mentioned a little bit of repertoire sort of stuff. A line I really love from your bio is the precision of a string quartet, the audacity of a rock band, the charm of a family sing-along. Lots of contrast, but very kind of cool. So I guess, can you expand on how that ties in? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the program for tonight as well. You know, all that connects, you know. I
mean, the string quartet thing resonates because that is, I think, the best parallel to how we work. You know, in terms of what our practice looks like, what our life looks like. You know, we put in more hours than we can count into the minutia of all, you know, every bar of the music, just the way a string quartet attacks a Bartok quartet. But the audacity of the rock band, I mean, it all feels, you know, if you zoom out from that microscope, it feels very sort of grunge or garage band, because we were just, you know, four dudes from Seattle who wanted to make a band. And then with, you know, so much as, so speaking on the repertoire of tonight, the program is called Songbook, and we're really drawing songs from American music that we feel are in conversation or in lineage with each other. And that goes back to some early shape note songs, and so like reinterpreting old Christian hymns that were sung in community in churches, like you know, this church that we're going to be performing in, while at the same time you had black composers and black musicians like Duke Ellington or the Golden Gate Quartet developing a language for American music through jazz, through gospel, and sharing that music with the world. So we're going to be playing some arrangements of that lineage of music, and then, you know, skipping forward into later in the 20th century, a lot of our heroes in the song side of American music, like John Prine, Judy Sill, Randy Newman, sharing little tidbits from them. And then through it all, we always respond to that stuff by sharing some original compositions as well that have been directly influenced from one thing or another. And in our concerts, we like to talk about it as well, and share those stories, so we can sort of outline those connections, and hopefully have people feel the type of intimacy that we feel with the music in the experience. And I'll also add that what we're most excited about tonight is our friend George Meyer is going to be sitting in with us on the fiddle, and he's absolutely brilliant. We've crossed paths with him before, but we've never gotten to straight up jam with him. Oh, sweet. So this is going to be really fun tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thoughts? Or I have another question before we wrap up. All right, cool. I'll hit it. So I'm just wondering if you have any upcoming projects, things you're excited about, you want to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, there's always like half a dozen things cooking on various burners,
Right.
front, middle,
Large
back, stove,
Oven.
warmer,
Yeah.
air fryer.
Right.
But I would say the major things on the horizon this season, Riley mentioned this ballet.
Yeah.
That has been many, many months in the works.
Is this something you were composing?
Yeah. So it's a wonderful organization in New York called Ballet Collective that was founded by a choreographer, Troy Schumacher, who is also a soloist with the New York City Ballet. And he, for over a decade now, has been commissioning new music every year to create new ballets.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Which is an incredible initiative.
Very exciting, yeah.
So we have written collectively as a group a 20-minute ballet that is premiering in New York at the end of October. And we're sort of in the final minutia of notes and feedback and editing of that.
Yeah.
So we're really excited about that. We'll probably end up recording that music following the ballet run.
Cool.
We also have another album in the can that we just finished recording.
Sweet.
That is a celebration of this incredible shape note singing tradition. So it includes a number of arrangements of existing shape note repertoire from the 19th century, as well as some new pieces that we've written in response.
And also includes a couple of guest spots from people who we have mentioned their names in this conversation.
Fantastic.
But we will not tell you which one.
Very exciting
album,
collaborations.
Yeah. Cool.
And then Riley also mentioned artist Haley Hendricks is a wonderful songwriter. So we have an album with her that's in the can that will be coming out sometime next year as well. So those are the things that are already in the pipeline, and there's always more
coming,
more to come.
That's great. You guys are so active. All right, cool. Well, the Westerlies are with us for a concert on Thursday, today, August 22nd. You can learn more about SkanFest events and buy tickets at skanfest.org. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Daniel.
Cool.